Ready to soundtrack your summer? With Red Bull Summer All Day Play, you choose a playlist that fits your summer vibe the best. Are you a festival fanatic, a deep-end DJ, a road dog, or a trail mixer? Just add a song to your chosen playlist and put your summer on track. Red Bull Summer All Day Play. Red Bull gives you wings. Visit redbull.com/brightsummer to learn more. See you this summer.
So good, so good, so good.
Everything you want for summer is at Nordstrom Rack stores now, and up to 60% off. Stock up and save on the brands you love like Vince, Sam Edelman, Frame, and Free People. Join the Nordy Club to unlock exclusive discounts, shop new arrivals first, and more. Plus, buy online and pick up at your favorite Rack store for free. Great brands, great prices. That's why you Rack.
Welcome to the Susan LoPresti Wellness, Mind, Body, and Soul podcast. This is the go-to space for midlife and mature women who are ready to reclaim their health, boost their energy, and live long, vibrant, and purposeful lives. Each week, we dive deep into natural wellness, holistic healing, anti-aging strategies, and healthy lifestyle habits to help you feel your best physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Whether you're navigating menopause, working through chronic conditions, or simply wanting to age gracefully and intentionally, this show is your sanctuary for science-backed insights, powerful stories, and soul-nourishing inspiration. So if you're a woman in your 40s, 50s, or older looking to thrive in the next chapter of life, you're in the right place. Today's guest is Dr. Kevin Tracey. He is recognized as the founding father of bioelectronic medicine, using technology to activate the body's own healing processes, and is one of the top cited scientists in the world. His latest book, The Great Nerve, The New Science of the Vagus Nerve and How to Harness Its Healing Reflexes, was just released and explores the real science behind the vagus nerve. Dr. Tracey can break down fact from fiction when it comes to topics like the ice baths and breath work and meditation, and he's explored firsthand alongside thought leaders like Wim Hof and even the Dalai Lama. His work uncovers how simple nerve stimulation can reduce harmful inflammation, a root cause of diseases ranging from arthritis to depression. And now several clinical trials are reaching pivotal stages. Dr. Tracey also leads the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research and founded the first company seeking FDA approval for a vagus nerve device. He's going to clarify what wellness seekers should actually know about the vagus nerve, drawing from 4 decades of research published in over 400 scientific papers and his own hands-on lab discoveries. So without further ado, Dr. Tracey, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to my podcast, and I can't wait to dive into this fascinating topic.
Well, thanks for having me on. It's great to be here.
You're very welcome. Dr. Tracey, let's start off by telling my audience what the vagus nerve is, what it does in our body, and anything else that you'd like to share about it.
The vagus nerve is part of your nervous system that starts in the brain, actually. So let's begin with, you have 2 vagus nerves. You have one on each side, like you have 2 thumbs and 2 kidneys. And it arises at the bottom of your brain as a paired nerve, one on the right and one on the left. And it's part of a system that's called the cranial nerve. So you have 12 of those, and this would be the 10th cranial nerve. It travels down your neck on both sides, across your chest and into your abdomen. And along the way, it sends branches to all the organs in your body that, frankly, you don't think about all day long. Your heart, your lungs, your liver, your pancreas. And what it's doing is it's carrying signals from the body up to the brain and from the brain back to the body. But there's kind of a misconception from the casual reader of the billions of web impressions and social media posts that are out there about the vagus nerve. So I've already said you have two of them. Actually, inside each of those two vagus nerve trunks on each side, you have 100,000 fibers. So properly put, you have 200,000 vagus nerves. And each of those has a specific job and a specific path and a specific anatomy. And so this becomes the source of a lot of confusion. When someone says, I want to stimulate my vagus nerve, I say, oh, really? You have 200,000 vagus nerves. Which one do you want to stimulate? The signals that travel in those 200,000 fibers carry the information that the brain needs and the nervous system needs to keep your organs functioning in balance and in harmony. And that's really the key to understanding why there's so much interest now in the vagus nerve as it relates to health.
Right. Now, I've heard about stimulating the vagus nerve. Is that a myth? Because I thought it was an actual thing that we could do to improve health.
You can stimulate the vagus nerve if you put a electrode on the vagus nerve and use a implanted device, medical device, FDA approved devices. And this has been done for many, many decades. That's one way to stimulate the vagus nerve. This has been a standard treatment for epilepsy, and it's been FDA approved treatment as well for depression, actually, in the United States and in Europe. Most recently, vagus nerve stimulation was literally front page of the New York Times News because the FDA recently approved stimulating the vagus nerve with a new device from a company that I co-founded called SetPoint Medical. This device is called an immunoregulator, and the FDA has now authorized the immunoregulator as a therapy for rheumatoid arthritis in patients who have severe progressing rheumatoid arthritis, despite the fact that they have either can't tolerate or haven't had clinical responses to powerful immunosuppressive drugs like biologics and JAK inhibitors. So we're sort of at the dawn of a new era where vagus nerve stimulation is now an FDA approved therapy for an autoimmune disease that affects at least, well, there's 1.5 million eligible patients now for the therapy in the United States alone. And as you know, autoimmune disease affects a lot more women than men.
Yes. Yes. I just want to go back to the stimulation of the vagus nerve for a moment. So is it a myth? Because I have heard that singing or making vocal sounds will also help to stimulate it. Is that just a myth at this point?
It's not a myth. Let's go down to first principles about what the vagus nerve does to your vocal cords. And we'll come back to what's potentially a myth and what's potentially an exaggeration and what is grounded in some scientific truth.
Okay.
So the vagus nerve, as I said, there's 200,000 fibers. Some of those fibers travel between your voice box, your larynx, and your brain. And they have a very important job in carrying the signals that influence how your vocal cords function. Now, that part of the vagus nerve has its own name. It's called the recurrent laryngeal nerve or the laryngeal nerve. And Galen, 2,000 years ago, the ancient Roman physician scientist, he proved by cutting the laryngeal nerves, the laryngeal branches of the vagus nerve, he proved in a pig that the pig could no longer squeal. So if you damage those nerves or cut them, and this can happen sometimes from tumors or trauma or even from some surgeries. If you damage those nerves, then you damage the. So what does that mean? It means that the signals in that part of the vagus nerve, now the part that goes into the larynx, which is not 200,000 fibers, it's probably a few thousand fibers or less, maybe a few hundred fibers.
Mhm.
Those in fact are active when you hum or sing or chant. And so humming and singing and chanting is sending signals through that part of your vagus nerve. So that's scientifically factually correct. But it's also scientifically factually correct that you can walk and chew gum at the same time. And why is that? Well, that's because specific nerve fibers do specific jobs. So you have, and they operate independently. So you have nerves to your mouth and gums and muscles of mastication and swallowing, so you can chew because those nerves are working. And you can walk because you have different nerve fibers that control the muscles of your legs. So when someone says to me, I joked before, I want to stimulate my vagus nerve, and I say, which ones? Well, when you hum and chant, you are in fact stimulating the branches of the vagus nerve that go to your voice box. Does that mean you're stimulating all the other, 199,000 fibers? No, of course not.
Right.
And that's where the myth or the exaggeration comes from. Now, that's fine because humming and chanting may actually, through dozens or hundreds or thousands of other mechanisms, psychological and physiological, they may have other benefits. Some people like to sing and it makes them feel better. And some people hate to sing and it would make them feel worse. Some people like to chant and they've stimulated their vagus nerves and they feel more relaxed, and that's great. I'm a big fan of that. But there are people who seriously dislike chanting. And in fact, they're chanting, they're stimulating their vagus nerves, but they're getting angry or anxious or unhappy. There's the disconnect. You follow?
Yes, I do. Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that.
Well, I'm not clarifying. I'm not trying to clarify for you. I'm trying to frame it as a way that it's an opportunity for more studies, right?
Yes.
It really is an opportunity for more studies.
Yes. Very interesting. So how is it affecting inflammation now? Because you said that there's a lot going on with that right now in rheumatoid arthritis, which is an autoimmune disease, correct?
Exactly right. So as you know, I wrote a new book. It's been out for a couple of months now called The Great Nerve. And the reason for that book now is to provide a in-depth answer to your question. What is the relationship between the vagus nerve and inflammation, and how can this potentially help patients with rheumatoid arthritis? So the simple answer is we discovered now almost 30 years ago, 27 years ago, we discovered that in those 200,000 vagus nerve fibers, some of them, we think it's a few hundred, maybe a couple of thousand fibers, are carrying signals from the brain to the immune system in your body. Particularly, we've studied the spleen. And those signals act like the brakes on your car to slow down the amount of inflammation in your body. And this came as a significant surprise because scientists and doctors historically had studied either the brain or the immune system, and they were thought of as kind of separate entities that rarely interacted with each other. And what this discovery did is it put sort of front and center the idea that if we really could develop devices that acted like the brakes on your car to stimulate the vagus nerve in a way that would activate those fibers to slow inflammation, then it might offer new hope for patients whose inflammation with rheumatoid arthritis, for instance, is not being controlled by the available drugs. And so that was sort of the idea that we started studying, as I said, about 27 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And after decades of work by my lab here at the Feinstein Institute in New York, part of Northwell Health, or by work done in dozens, if not hundreds of other laboratories around the world, sort of exhaustively diving into the specific mechanisms, the specific nerves, the specific molecules that are activated in the vagus nerve to turn off inflammation in the immune system. We now understand how to do it. And the set points device was subjected to several clinical trials. Most recent one, 242 patients with rheumatoid arthritis in the United States at about 40 centers. The device was implanted in the left neck through a small incision. Same day surgery, go in the morning, go home in the afternoon. The device is about the size of a multivitamin, and it sits in the neck at about the level of the Adam's apple. Once it's in place, you can't see it or feel it. It's under the strap muscle, the sternocleidomastoid muscle. And the clinical effects have been very, very significant. About 80% of the patients 1 year later had some significant clinical benefit. And now remember, these are patients who many of them had gone for years without significant clinical benefit from these powerful drugs. And so there's a lot of interest in this. It's a sort of a whole new way of thinking about things. And it was time for a book because it's so new. There's so many questions, not only for the patients, but for the doctors and the payers and the caregivers. So I tried to put it all in one place in accessible language.
Right. And so I'm assuming on drugs, there would be side effects to the drugs that are being used. And I'm also assuming that implanting this device, there are no side effects to it, drug interactions or what have you.
So let's talk about the side effects of the two things and compare them. So with drugs, it's been a trade-off, as Sir Mark Feldman has written about several times. He's a leading rheumatologist in the world, won the Lasker Prize actually for the early development of monoclonal anti-TNF antibodies, which are one of the biologics. What Mark has said is that up till now, using immunosuppressing drugs to treat rheumatoid arthritis has been a trade-off because you're giving the patients a choice. Yes, we can lower your inflammation and hopefully make you feel better, but you're taking the risk of these drugs, which is immunosuppression, which is a dangerous side effect. That means that you're reducing the ability of the immune system to respond to viruses and bacteria and even to cancer cells. And so as a patient taking these things, there's black box warnings from the FDA, which is the most serious side effect warning the FDA can give. And so a lot of patients are afraid of those side effects and with some justification. Now, these drugs have helped millions of people too. They're not all bad, obviously, but they do have these serious side effects, and they only work in 40 or 50% of the patients. In addition to the side effects, they're invasive. They have to be injected, the biologics. And in the United States, they can run between $50,000 and $100,000 per year. So some patients, frankly, can take these drugs for a few years, but then they have to choose between paying for their drugs and bankruptcy or foregoing other expenses. It's a real issue. So that's the drugs. But in contrast, vagus nerve stimulation, as I said, for epilepsy and depression has been around for decades, since the 1990s. It's safe. There's no black box warnings. There's no immunosuppression. And the surgery has risks, of course, as you point out. All surgery has some risks, but the risks are very small through as I said, a small incision, same day surgery, and they're well understood. You know, the risk of a wound infection, the risk of damage to some tissue during the surgery, those things can be mitigated with surgical expertise and sterile techniques. So for the patient, it's more complicated than comparing this to that, because in the patient case, for you and me, that would be the answer. Which, if I had to do one of these things and I'm otherwise healthy, which one do I want? Immunosuppression, injecting myself every 2 weeks or every month, versus a surgery, one and done, no immunosuppression. But for the patient, there's another factor, because they can't pick up a pencil because they're suffering so much, or they're so fatigued they can't get out of bed some mornings, or they can't button their blouse to go to work because their hands are all swollen and painful. And so for them, it's not simply the risk of this drug or this surgery. It's like these drugs aren't working for me, and this surgery might work. So it's always a little more complicated when you're the patient, you know. And look, I'm a very lucky person. I've been able to work on doing things I love, science and medicine for 4 decades, and I'm very lucky to be able to do that. I chose to do it. It's what I want to do. The patients, they don't choose to have this condition. And they volunteer, many of them, to participate in these clinical trials. And they're helping advance the science by doing that. And now we're at a place where I hope I've met some patients who've significantly benefited from this, and hopefully you'll meet some someday too. And I tried to capture their stories, real world stories, in the book.
Yeah. So what's the trigger for rheumatoid arthritis? What sets it off?
No one knows. No one really knows for sure the cause of rheumatoid arthritis. People talk about, for the cause of pretty much any disease, it's genes and environment, right? And nature and nurture. So there are some families that have a quote unquote higher risk of getting rheumatoid arthritis, but there's no single gene that's ever been proved to cause rheumatoid arthritis. It's a combination of factors. No one's certain what it is in the environment that would trigger rheumatoid arthritis. And there's a lot of theories. You know, could it be some unknown virus or infection? Maybe. Could it be something in the air, or something in the food chain, or something in the water? No one knows. No, there's a lot of people working on it.
Right. Is it more prominent in one gender versus the other? Do women get it more so than men?
Yes, it's much more frequent in women, and it usually comes on sort of in the prime of life. I mean, rheumatoid arthritis is not sort of the aches and pains you get when you're in your 40s and it's going to rain the next day and you injured your knee playing sports in high school. And that's not rheumatoid. Rheumatoid arthritis affects many of the joints in the body, and they can become very swollen and painful and red, and people can have loss of function of their hands or their knees and elbows, and some people can end up in wheelchairs or can't go up a flight of stairs. And it also can affect other organs like the brain and the heart and the kidneys, and people can experience chronic fatigue and depression and anxiety and cognitive impairments. So it's a serious condition. And the idea that implanting a small device to activate this vagus nerve system brakes on the immune system, which we call the inflammatory reflex.
Mm-hmm.
This has made a lot of people really interested, and raised a lot of new questions. How are we going to do this? Who's going to pay for it? How many people will be eligible? How many people will benefit from it?
Right. Now, is your book that you wrote, is it geared for patients to learn more about the device and about the disease, or is it more for clinical?
No, it's for everybody. So
Okay.
I wrote it in what I hope is very accessible language, telling the story in the first part of the book about your first question. What is the vagus nerve?
Right.
What have we learned about it over 2,000 years of studying it? What does it do? And how do the signals that it carries, how do those signals contribute to maintaining balanced, healthy function of your organs, which we, of course, we call homeostasis.
Mm-hmm.
Part 2 of the book dives in to more focus on what we know about inflammation and how stimulating the vagus nerve medically or surgically can control inflammation, and where the idea for vagus nerve stimulation came from to treat inflammation and rheumatoid arthritis. And part 3 of the book touches on the fact that there are billions of web impressions, billions, and social media impressions where people tell you to do this, that, or the other thing to stimulate your vagus nerve, and all will be right with the world. and I break it down, one thing at a time. Cold exposure, breathing methods. You asked about chanting. I don't have a whole chapter on that, but I kind of rolled that up with breathing methods.
Yeah.
And some other of these things. And I explained this, like I did, you and I talked about,
Yeah.
like I explained for chanting, yes, there's some truth to that, right? There are vagus nerve fibers that you use when you chant, the ones that go to your voice box. But what about all the other ones? And how much do we really understand? And then importantly, in part 3, I also included a chapter called FAQs because everybody has questions now. The patients are going to have questions. And I said, well, here's some of the questions I think you should ask your doctor. And the answers are for the patients and for your listeners and for the doctors, because a lot of doctors know no aspersions on them. I'm a doctor too. Most people don't think about the vagus nerve, and many doctors haven't really thought about it much since medical school. And so this is all very new science. It's very sort of pioneering. And in the book, I wanted the information to be accessible as a platform for people to understand this is where the science indicates this is what the physiology and the neuroscience and the molecular biology is. And this is true. What's true, we know to be factually correct. This is what we know to be factually incorrect. And then there's this huge gray area. And that's not because people are trying to hide anything from anyone. It's because there's a lot more to do. There's a lot more work to do, and there's a lot of questions to be asked and answered.
Yeah. So I have a question on autoimmune diseases in general. Do you know what the trigger is that is the onset of it? Is it food? Is it our environment, lifestyle, a combination?
Once again,
Anyone?
I think it's going to, first of all, the simple scientific answer is in most cases, we don't know.
Right.
But in epidemia, I'm not an epidemiologist. There are epidemiologists who study your question specifically for each individual autoimmune condition. I mean, some of these conditions, multiple sclerosis comes to mind. The incidence changes depending on whether you're in warmer latitudes or colder latitudes. That's the overall incidence of the condition, how many people have it. Some people with multiple sclerosis can be fine unless they get in a warm bath, and that can now activate an episode of problems, and vice versa for cold baths. So you can look at environmental triggers. Most of these autoimmune diseases, they wax and wane. You have good days and bad days, and there are environmental triggers and emotional triggers in some of these conditions to making the condition worse in an individual patient. But what the original molecular and genetic cause of these conditions is very uncertain. The most recent work from Larry Steinman and his team at Stanford in the last year or two implicated the virus that causes the Epstein-Barr virus as being something that can lead to the later onset of multiple sclerosis in some patients. And so these are the kinds of things that are being studied, but there's no simple answer to your question.
Right. Well, because myself personally, I have Hashimoto's disease, so that's an autoimmune. And for me, it developed when I was in perimenopause and also a very stressful part of my life at that point. I had a lot of things going on. And in talking with other women, they seem to also, during perimenopause or menopause, develop autoimmune diseases as well. So I was just wondering, like, if there is a trigger or something that, even stress, to bring it on.
So there is a lot of interest in this question. I do not have a simple answer for you.
Yeah.
There are questions about whether fluctuating hormone levels contribute to the onset of autoimmune conditions like Hashimoto's or something else. Stress, of course, is a often talked about and important factor in understanding the manifestations of any illness, if not all illnesses. I mean, if you have an illness, then you probably let's be very simple and specific, because I think it's an illustrative example. So you probably remember the day, I certainly do, years ago, when we all knew that people, type A personalities, they used to be called, had more likely to have ulcers.
Yes.
right? And the type A personality was the aggressive, the high strung, the go person.
Yes.
And the type B people, the more relaxed que sera style, had less ulcers. Well, it turns out that ulcers, peptic ulcers, stomach ulcers, are not caused by stress. They're caused by bacterial infection
Yes.
with Helicobacter pylorus, H. pylorus. And if you take antibiotics in those patients, their ulcers can be cured without surgery and without seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist. Now, why is that? Well, think about it for a second. If you have an infection in your stomach and it's burning a hole in your stomach with acid secretion, how's that going to make you feel? It's going to make you feel stressed.
Right.
And it doesn't, so having the things go together doesn't prove cause and effect. That's what it comes down to, right?
Yes.
It doesn't mean that they're not related, but it doesn't prove cause and effect. And so in the case of the ulcer, the real question would be, well, if you give a stress test to all these people with a burning ulcer in their stomach before you give them antibiotics and after you give them antibiotics, what's their stress scores? I'll bet you $100 it's a lot less after the antibiotics.
Absolutely.
So that kind of analysis is real. You can do it in something where there's a black and white sort of answer, antibiotics or no antibiotics. You move into a condition, an autoimmune condition, where we don't have great treatments to turn them on and off like a switch, as you experienced in your personal story. Makes it harder to figure out the cause and effect relationship between the disease and the stress.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the history of medicine, right? Take epilepsy. You go back centuries and nobody knew anything about it, what caused it, why it happened. So what did the early physicians do? They blamed God, and they tried to treat epileptic seizures with exorcisms. And eventually, later on comes a much better understanding that maybe it's not the devil causing the seizures in this poor patient. It must be the patient's fault. They have the wrong attitude. They're stressed. They have to change their behavior somehow. Well, that doesn't work. And eventually, you find out in the modern era that in epilepsy there are actually neurons in the brain that are hypersensitive to their electrical firing, and this sets up sort of electrically active circuits in the brain that cause the seizures, and those can be controlled with drugs. And so it's that progression from what we don't know to what we know that is the real answer to your question.
Right.
And you experienced it in your life and in your story.
Yes.
You went through a whole period of nobody knew anything, and you had to figure out what worked for you, which really is another sort of strategy, right? What is it that I can afford to do for myself? Because some of these things that are being touted are very expensive, very complicated. How much risk am I willing to take trying things? And should you be checking with your doctor or your healthcare provider that before you try some sort of self-help things that it's safe? Absolutely. Some things in some conditions that you might think would be trivial, like jumping in an ice cold bath, in some patients that can be very dangerous. You should check with your doctor.
Yeah.
And then third, if you find something that works for you, great. If you can afford it and it's safe and it works for you, great. That doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody else. That I recoil against, because we saw this with COVID, long COVID, that some patients, actually victims of COVID at autopsy, had significant damage to their vagus nerve and had significant evidence that the virus had infected their vagus nerve and damaged it. So to tell those patients, well, just do a few more push-ups and stimulate your vagus nerve, that's not really fair to them, is it?
No.
If the vagus nerve is damaged or some other nerve contributing to your condition, then there may be other things that are needed.
Yeah. That's great advice. Yes. Dr. Tracey, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to leave my audience with today, and where they can find you as well?
So thank you for having me on the show, first of all.
It was my
And
pleasure.
as a final thought, I would like to encourage people to continue to think about the basics for a healthy lifestyle. You know, eating a balanced diet, exercising regularly, getting enough sleep, staying cognitively and socially engaged with friends and family and community, pursue your hobbies, maintain balance in your life, understanding the things you can't control shouldn't be the things that upset you, and focusing on the things you can control. These basic health strategies share something in common, which is they're all in one way or another associated with lowering your resting heart rate. And so back to your analogy about stimulating the vagus nerve, if you do those things and you have a lower resting heart rate, then by definition you've stimulated the vagus nerve fibers that go to your heart and slow it down. So that's a good way to feel good about yourself and a healthy approach to your life, and do those things and keep a low resting heart rate. And thanks again for having me on the show.
You're very, very welcome. And so you're located in New York, correct?
The Feinstein Institute is the research arm at Northwell Health. Northwell Health is the largest healthcare provider in New York City and state. And we recently opened a brand new center for bioelectronic medicine for patients with rheumatoid arthritis. You can contact the center and a patient navigator there by emailing Center for Bioelectronic Medicine, one word, Center for Bioelectronic Medicine at northwell.edu. And for rheumatoid arthritis right now, we are beginning to navigate patients through the process to see if they're eligible for a vagus nerve stimulator, an immunoregulator.
Where is that center located?
It is Long Island, which is a few miles east of the Queens line, of the New York City line. And but our physicians and our rheumatologists go from Staten Island to Montauk up to Western Connecticut and Westchester County. So we have doctors participating in the Center for Bioelectronic Medicine that span the whole greater New York area.
Okay, because I'm in New York also. I'm in Bayside, Queens.
Well, not far.
No, not at all. Northwell Health is my healthcare provider.
Great.
Yeah. So it was so nice to meet you. Thank you so much for your time today. I love the work that you're doing, and there's so much promise in rheumatoid arthritis with this device that's been implemented, and I look forward to seeing where it takes people's health. Hopefully it improves a lot of people. Thank you for your work, and thank you for coming on today.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. Thank you all for joining today. I appreciate each and every one of you. If this episode resonated with you, please leave me a comment. I love comments. And please also, if you think that this episode could benefit someone who you know and love, kindly share it out with them as well. And let them know about my podcast. If you're not currently following me, I would love it if you could follow me here, and this way you'll know when the next episode will air, which is every Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Again, thank you so much for joining. Please leave me your comments, and please be sure to follow me. Until the next time, be well, stay happy, and bye for now. Take good care, everyone.
Struggling with weight loss? Prolon's 5-day fasting mimicking diet is a clinically developed nutrition program designed to promote fat loss while protecting lean body mass. Developed at USC's Longevity Institute, it assists the body in entering a fasting-like state that helps reset metabolism and target visceral fat. In just 5 days, Prolon offers a science-backed approach to weight loss without extreme restriction or guesswork. Get 15% off plus a $40 bonus gift when you subscribe at prolonlife.com/now.